you get to see this in motion here. And again, I'll just kind of leave some of these out that you can refer to, but in order to, overcome that hurdle, that mental block of seeing too much detail in a scene and having color be that big barrier to how you're going to tackle things, having a good value study, I think, is the most important way to go about that. All right, you're going to, oh, you need to spotlight me again, I think. Did you spotlight me?
Oh, true, I will.
I don't know. I'm seeing it right now. Okay, there we go. Thanks. Okay, so again, the difference between just getting bogged down in separate little shapes of colors and not paying attention to values, which happens all the time, trying to find a way to, I'm always encouraging the students to kind of squint their eyes down at the scene. What looks light on my value studies, I just leave white paper. But so you're not just thinking about, oh, this is a white building back here. Okay, so that then you leave it white paper. It's a white building, but compared to the sky, it's a deeper value. Okay, so I've got to include some of those in that earlier wash. Same thing with all these. Another tendency that students have to overcome is just when it comes time to putting the darks in, they put in every dark shape they see. So again, trying to establish that hierarchy of what's important, what's not important. And in general, when I'm putting my darks into a scene, I'm trying to create that visual sense of depth and space. So I'm not putting in all those dark windows that you see. They're completely superfluous. You can see the shape of a landscape, or a cityscape in the background there just by the shapes of those buildings. All right, and you've got a road, people walking around. That vague abstract shape reads as a backdrop of buildings without the windows. Okay, so again, just practicing those things that with the use of a value study is hugely important.
If you're captivated by what Andy Evansen shows you in this video, we have a hot deal for you. We're thrilled to invite you to his complete learning program, The Art of Watercolor. During the program, you'll master watercolor through a systematic approach of Andy Evansen. Get rid of the fear of any subject and start enjoying the process of painting. Create more than 20 complete scenes. Get solid skills and knowledge of all painting topics such as skies, trees, water, animals, figures, etc. You will also get a certificate of completion and participate in online exhibition to win valuable prizes. Gain confidence and paint independently. Ready to boost your skills and bring them to the next level. To join, just click the link in the upper right corner of this video. You'll be directed to an overview page, giving you a sneak peek into the transformative journey that awaits. You can also find the link in the description to this video. Join Andy's learning program and elevate your skills.
So what I'm going to do here is this kind of, I already blocked this in as I've got my pencil drawing on there, and I put the first wash on top of here. That first unifying wash, once you stop thinking about separations and trying to find a way to unify your paintings and understanding that if something is darker, you paint right through it. This first wash becomes much easier. All right, you're not worried about just painting the sky and stopping where it hits the buildings. Okay, I can wet my paper and just cover everything with that nice unifying kind of a warm gray glow all over the whole painting. Now, right from the start, right from that very first wash, everything is harmonious because I'm letting the wet street reflect the sky in some areas. These colors are all mixing and merging through. Some of them are going to be left behind. Those shapes that I left white paper on my value study, those are in general the shapes that I'm going to leave behind when I'm going to do my color version of that shape. So a lot of those colors that are mixing and merging together are going to be still showing through in a later stage. All right, so the practical part of this, the practicing the value studies, painting the value studies. So I've already created these shapes once in my mind's eye, and now I'm doing them for the second time on my color painting, not just for the very first time. And that allows me again to have that freedom, that confidence to paint fast. Like I was saying before, when you're painting loosely, you want to paint fairly rapidly, but not just fast without a plan. Okay, that's way too much to paint. I wouldn't know where to start. That I can paint. Okay, that's my plan. Much simpler, but still very descriptive. Okay, all the shapes, all the big important shapes that I need are there. The taxi cab in the middle of the street, the people crossing the street, the ladies with the umbrella, and then of course the backdrop of all the buildings on that European street scene are there as well. So now, in order to do this in color, instead of just painting that one big connected middle value shape in Payne's gray, I'm going to repaint it, but now I'm going to use the colors that are on my reference photograph here. I'm going to take that down in the corners. I don't know why that's curling up here. Get rid of that other thing. Maybe that'll help. There we go. So it's nice and flat down there. Sorry, I've got lights on there. This is a shiny photograph. Oh, well, take that out of there. Okay, so I'm going to mix some of these colors for the buildings in the background, that variety of the burnt siennas and ochres and neutral grays and things. And I'm going to try and let that merge right down into the sidewalk, into the street, coming through, connecting those into the car. I'm going to try and find a way to connect as many of these separate individual shapes as possible through this middle value wash or stage. So again, I'm going to just kind of mix a little variety of on my palette and get it ready to go with just some of these colors. I don't want it to get overly colorful. Again, I'm thinking about value. So in order to get a good middle value back there, maybe I have to dull or gray down some of these buildings. I've got some neutral tint for that. Got more of an ochre color there. I'm going to have kind of a weird greenish color on that building in the background. I'm going to want that there. All right, and as I'm going across, I'm mixing these ochres and browns for the buildings, that green building as I come across, and then as I get in down to here, the trees are going to be darker, so I've just got that larger building in the foreground here that I need to contend with. It looks like it's got a little pink in it, so I'm going to get some of that color on my palette right away. And then down into the sidewalk, I'm going to be painting right through the lady's legs. I'll mix a lot more paint for that area when I get down to it. But I'll get it started here on my palette right away. You can see I'm never really just grabbing a color from my palette and using it. All right, you're going to get used to color mixing as you watch me go through some of these stages as well. Right from the very start of the course, that first lesson or the program, that when I'm talking about the types of brush strokes, working wet into wet, demonstrating my value studies, you'll see this all in a practical manner later. Okay, so I'm just going to try and replicate this shape using some of these colors and show you the difference in how I can simplify things. I'm going to start over here with these buildings. On the left, I can leave a little bit of the chimney pots behind. I can leave a little light window or two behind in a spot if I feel like it, but I don't have to contend with too many of them. The viewer is going to know that there are windows back there. Okay, and I'm just going to change the color on my brush a little bit into a more reddish kind of a building here. And I'm going to touch that bead and paint around it. I'm painting around my little canopies and umbrellas that are in the background there. Trying to simplify shapes as best as I can. More little canopies back there. Underneath them, it's going to hopefully connect right down to my little car there. So I'm just negatively painting around some of those lighter shapes that I put in from that very first wash. Change the color on my brush again a little bit here. Keeping everything nice and wet. Look at the bottom of that shape that I'm painting, all that paint and water that's left behind there. That's important. Now I'm going to get a nice mixing and merging of some of these shapes without getting too carried away with hard edges and light gaps. Okay, here's that little tower in the background now. Interesting little shape. Like that. Okay, now I'm over by that greenish building. I brush off, dry it off. Grab that weird green color. Touch that bead and start painting that building. Right up to and connecting to the umbrellas of the people below. Here's that canopy that's right there. I'm painting around, trying to paint this shape, only now changing the color on my brush once in a while, that's it. Breaking up the top of it a little bit with some of the roof colors. A little bit more orangey on the roof. If I start dropping a little bit of that stuff in also and just letting it fuzz with everything else, you can get a little bit of variety in those areas. Just again, trying to show the rooftops. Back to more of a grid. I keep looking over here and then back to my reference photograph. Simplify, simplify, simplify as much as I can. Over to another taller kind of a cathedral here. Just a big shape is all. Right down, that's going to connect down to my umbrellas. I'm trying to leave a nice good bead there so that I'm going to start connecting the lower plane here with what's happening up above. All right, now I've got a little bit of that light building that I put that pale wash on from before. I can connect that right to all this stuff. Again, I'm going to leave a little bit of my previous wash behind. Some of those lights. There's those columns, those pillars, just a few of them. There's that big shape, leaving a little bit of a highlight behind. Not really painting buildings, right? Just kind of painting the silhouette of those buildings on my paper here. A contour of them, let them go right up and off the paper. Zoom out just a little bit more here. All right, so comparing this shape to that shape, very similar up to this point. I'm going to continue and kind of paint that whole building right down. The trees are going to be darker later, so I'm going to put that on top of this. But any gaps that I have between those trees, I don't want white paper. I want to see that building through it, so I'm washing right through this. Again, if you were just going to be painting this without coming up with your plan of attack, the tendency is to just not think about those kind of things. What's going to be left behind later when I leave that shape? So now through the use of the value study, I'm thinking more in terms of values and ways to make things harmonious. Here's the little bottom of that umbrella. The whole umbrella isn't in light. It's got a light top left side, and then it's more middle value on the other side. So now it's just connected into my building shape, right into my figures down here. Paint around that little guy standing there on the sidewalk.
I have a question for Andy's wife. Is it possible to move the palette up, so the painting up instead? I mean, like moving that frame, because apparently the Artefacto logo is hiding it. If not, then let's not even bother. But if it's possible.
It is. Laura, can you move my palette image up a little bit, please? They said I don't see a logo on my screen, so I don't know.
No, it's in this on the streaming on the website.
Gotcha. Okay, so now I'm going to connect down to these little shapes down below, the umbrellas, the figures, the people, keeping it nice and simple. That's what I was talking about before. A lot of times the students start to figure out ways to keep things really nice and clean and simple through the value studies, but then when they go to color, they almost treat it in a completely different manner. I have to try and convince them, why are you painting it so differently just because you're going to color? Treat it the same way. Big value shapes here. Okay, little things down below. But Laura, can you move my palette up? That's what they were
Or
asking.
maybe switch places with the palette and the face.
Camera image of my palette, can you move it up higher on the screen?
Like this?
Yes.
Exactly, thank you. Wonderful. Thanks, Bettina, for pointing that out.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. All right, I keep looking at my value study to make sure I'm keeping things similar, nice and loose. Got that lady there. Wanted that image to be down there. Okay, nice big connected abstract shapes. That's all I'm painting. That negatively painting around my car back here, finding a way to connect that car down to the street a little bit, maybe with reflections and shadows. More people's legs. All right, before I lose my bead over there, I want to start connecting the shadow side of the road, just like I did on my value study. Same shape. Now I want to connect that blue vehicle to this, but it's a middle value, kind of a deeper blue. So I'm going to get that color on my brush, paint into there, paint around my headlights, which are much brighter, obviously. Leaving that little shape behind. So that's connected right down to the tires and the shape below it. Again, I found that I need to go some middle value on the ground, so I can show the headlight reflections a little bit better. So I'm just going to come in and paint some of that crosswalk image here. So that really helps to pop out my headlight glare. And that's where the people are crossing the road there, that crosswalk. So it was important for me to show that. Everything's connected to something else at this point. All right, down into my people. It's kind of a light shirt on one of the ladies there, but this person has darker shirt. Here's some darker legs. Crossing the sidewalk, go even darker still. Some of these I can put in later with my darks, but I'm trying to make sure that all these figures are incorporated in somehow, some way, if I can. And they have reflections coming down into the street also.
Andy, we have some questions about how you created the highlights. Did you use masking fluid or did you just use negative space? The car's highlights and all of these.
Oh, I painted around them. I just painted around them. You didn't see those before until I just did this stage, right? So all I'm doing at this stage is just creating lighter highlighted shapes by negatively painting around them. And you just kind of saw me do most of that. Creating the shapes of the little canopy tops by painting around them. Right? And those headlights from the previous wash. Yeah, I don't use masking fluid. I don't like masking fluid. It leaves too perfect and correct of a shape. I like to have the randomness of just painting around shapes. So doing some of that dry brush like I did on the value study, kind of darkening up the bottom of the street here to help that with the glare from up above. Same thing I did on my value study I'm doing here. Not reinventing the wheel. All right, into that middle section underneath the lamppost. There's no reason to paint around a dark lamppost. I'm going to create this shape of the sidewalk like so, just like I did on the value study. Again. Same thing. Over to the right side here. But it is important for me to, I can't stress that enough. The reason I paint my value studies is because I practice, it gives me a chance to practice creating the headlights and the canopies and the umbrella lights and some of the architectural shapes. Even I'm doing it with, you know, just black and white, obviously, but because I'm painting them, I'm using the same tools as I will be doing on my finished color painting. So it's a much better way to warm up. And make sure my figures are starting to reflect a little bit, paint right through. These two ladies are both much darker than what's behind them. No reason to paint around them. That's one of the biggest areas where students trip up, is now they're seeing these figures. And obviously we all know figures are very important in the grand scheme of things in your paintings. So we just start painting around them to leave this big empty shape that they're going to fill in later. It's important to make sure your figures are connected. That's going back to the program when we deal with not only figures, but with animals also, through using good values, making sure that they're all connected. All right, now I'm going to go into some of these gals under this other umbrella shape here, just with their shirts. A little bit of a blue shirt there also. like so. They're just connecting, they're all touching each other. All right, and then last but not least, some of their jeans and stuff here. Darker pants again. That umbrella was right about there. Heads, here's their jeans, their darker pants. And I can put some of these in again later on, but I'm just gonna with my dark shapes, but I'm gonna go ahead and start putting some of their jeans in now so that they fuzz and connect a little bit better with everything else that's going on here. I can even start putting in some of the, there's a figure too that's facing us, so I can see their flesh tones. I can go ahead and put in like this lady's face here.
We have a question from Linda. Do you lose your drawing line when you paint?
Sometimes, but I usually draw dark enough that it's not too big of an issue. But I do think that's another thing I talk about a lot in my workshops is the problem of overdrawing. I think students have a tendency to draw way too much, a lot more than they need. You need to get comfortable just putting in shapes with your brush. Your brush is no different than a pencil. I don't need to draw my windows in, okay? I can just paint the windows. So students have a tendency, like I said, to just kind of draw everything that they need on their scene, and it becomes kind of a coloring book that way when you've got way too many shapes that you're painting around. And that increases the likelihood of separating objects. The more pencil marks you have on your page, those are little stop signs on your painting, every pencil mark. So you've got to overcome that tendency to overdraw. Giving the shadow side of her scarf there. And I'll just, again, to make sure that they're starting to merge, I'll just kind of start putting a little bit of her in here as well. This guy pants, even though they're going to be darker. Okay, so the difference between that and that. All right, no separations, connections. And what that allows you to do is, yes, there are multiple little areas of interest in this scene. Obviously, the two ladies, you know, front and center with their umbrella, but this little active group stepping out into the crosswalk, the taxi cab with the glare of the headlights, the interesting architecture in the background, it's all part of the scene. It's all part of what attracted me to this subject. So there's no focal point, okay? But there are little areas of interest that I can start to create through my darks later on. I can pop the dark on the taxi cab. I can darken up some of that interesting little group of figures. I can darken up my main figures here. I can pop their umbrella by putting dark trees above the umbrella shape. So I'll use my darks with even the lampposts. I'll use my darks to start to refine those little areas of interest where I want the viewer to go. But this initial block in through my middle values and in terms of just kind of separating things out of light and mid, that's really important. That establishes my composition. And like I said, now everything, even though I'm going to have a few little areas where I want the viewer to look, they're all still connected. They're not divided by all these little white gaps and not thinking about value, just thinking about local color. Hope that makes sense.
Yes. And people are curious, would you make the lines of the houses straighter, and what are your next steps for this painting?
So the first part of that, would I make the lines of my houses straighter? No. I like them when they're a little bit off center like that, okay? They don't have to be overly defined. Just because they're buildings, I think when you're trying to paint loosely, straight lines aren't effective when you're trying to paint loosely, okay? If your buildings are too perfect, it doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't fit with the rest of the painting. So I can come in and straighten out a little bit of the roof lines and a couple spots up here now with my darks, right? I still have my darks to put in here. And there's another little roof line there that I can put in, maybe a slightly darker window or two in the background. But overall, you're going to see those as buildings, even though they're not perfectly straight. And that's where the masking fluid issue comes into play also. I think students are so worried about making sure that their shapes are perfect, that they're gonna come right from the beginning with masking fluid and they leave this too tight of a perfect shape versus just letting it happen, and treating it a little bit more flair. All right, we got a couple little darker lines on here too. So my next step now would be to start making sure that some of these little vague areas are starting to read a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to come in. Normally I would wait just a little bit longer, but for the purposes here of this webinar, I'll go ahead and start putting in some of these darker shapes, these trees over here. All right, now I can come in with a deeper, darker green and start painting these little trees and creating the negative shape of their umbrella by painting around that with a darker shape of these trees. So now that really helps to pop out their umbrella, right? Didn't have to use masking fluid for that. I can paint those larger shapes. If it comes down to a smaller shape here and there later that I want to put in, I can resort to gouache for that, or scratching it out or trying to lift it out or what have you. But yeah, in general, I try and avoid masking fluid because it just leaves perfect positive shapes, and I don't want perfect positive shapes in my loose painting. I want them close enough. Okay, so look, those darks now, that's what I would do to really pop them out. The ladies walking, again, might fuzz a little bit because I didn't wait very long, but now I can put my ladies in and start really bringing them forward. I painted right through their bodies earlier because they're going to be darker than their surroundings. Okay, didn't have to worry about it. Now I can come in right on top because I'm not thinking about color. I'm not thinking about the fact that they're figures. I just saw a value shape, a big dark value shape that I could paint right through earlier, and now I can paint around and connect them later, give them a little bit of a reflection down into the road or the sidewalk here. Make it look like it's wet. So now I've got that figure on. The lady next to her has more of a kind of a reddish burgundy coat. And again, that is much darker in value. And she's connected to this other figure. So even with my darks and my details, I'm still trying to make sure that everything is harmonious and working together. I've got her darker jacket there. And her little handbag was off to the side, and her slacks were kind of a buff color here, skirt or whatever it might be. Right, more value on that.
We have a question about how do you tackle windows? Mine always look too drawn.
Yeah, so dry brushing your windows is a very good idea. When I have them on, you have a building and you want to suggest, obviously these buildings are way in the back, so I'm probably not even going to put them in. But when you have a building like so, and you want to show some windows on it, if it's a building that's much closer up, I try and do just some dry brush. So I'll use a synthetic brush, and I'll try and just put my brush on the paper and do a quick little stroke like that, not even finishing it. And don't try and paint them all exactly the same. Okay, so that little bit of a broken dry brush stroke is enough to look like windows. All right, instead of trying to make them perfectly. So you just have to practice dry brush, which we do in this program in the module that talks about the types of brush strokes. I think it's module 2.
Wonderful. And we see here, we can also compare the value study to the painting, that there are 3 layers. The only difference is that the first layer had some color, some light colors, and the second layer had some medium colors, and the third layer also has some colors. But apart from that, it is very much the same.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to copy my plan. Okay, that's what I was saying. That just because I'm going to color now, yes, if I was doing a big half sheet studio painting, I would probably take a little bit more time on some of these shapes, but the lesson is you don't have to. Okay, if it's reading well as in your value study, Why treat it completely differently? Follow that map, okay, the simplicity. And I mean, look how much, this is a small little 9 by 12, but look how much of that painting I got done in what was that,
20
15,
minutes.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you've got the guts of your painting down. Now it's just all the little stuff. But those are the things, these types of details that I'm putting in now, these are the things that people worry about way too early in the painting process. They're worried about making this car look just like a car from the very first wash that they're putting on, by either avoiding it or making sure that they have tires on the car that early. I'm just suggesting things a little bit here with some of these shapes, but now it'll all hopefully pop once I put some of these smaller little dark shapes on. Okay, getting the tires on, and again, not overworking it. I don't want to get too carried away with the shape of that car. So keep it nice and simple. It looks enough like a car. Now I can darken up some of the clothing of these figures walking across the street here. Here was her pants, pant leg. She's had the little purse like she had before. This figure had a much darker jacket on. I'm gonna try and put that in here. Even one of her pants legs was a little darker. This dude had darker pants on there. Okay, maybe a little bit of a burnt sienna touch or two for some skin tone. But overall, just those little indications of form that I'm putting in here to make it look sort of like people. What else are they going to be? The viewer's going to see this from a distance and kind of figure that these are some figures trying to walk across the street at that sidewalk. When you look at them that closely, they probably don't look like people. But when I zoom out, they'll look plenty like figures in the long run. And this person gives her an arm. Okay, so when I zoom out now, and in the context of the scene, you're going to see little figures walking across that crosswalk there without getting too carried away with things. All right, so the importance of just thinking about shapes and values, it all comes into play throughout the whole process. But like I said before, what we're going to cover in this program, it's really difficult to put it all together. Okay, get a good sky in, get a good looking vehicle in, make your figures convincing, painting the trees so that they look loose and random. All these little separate things that you have to put together in one whole painting. And unfortunately, that's what most people do. The only time they practice, they're doing an entire painting. And there's all these little individual things that you have to try and make sure are convincing, and then put it all together into one big harmonious shape. That's really difficult to do.